Hello, I'm Jan. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. And as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. On this episode, we focus on the recent political developments in Georgia, as the ruling Georgian Dream party plans to introduce new laws targeting media and NGOs. 49 opposition MPs have had their mandates revoked. What is more, officials in Tbilisi have elected to leave the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe following the body's criticism of the latest elections in the country, calling for a repeat of the vote. So let's take a look at our latest report to find out more about the situation.
The Georgian Dream is enacting its designs for the country, as it has made a series of very controversial decisions. One of these includes plans to introduce new laws which will target NGOs and media. These are eerily similar to the highly disputed and protested foreign agent law from 2024. They are meant to restrict foreign funding for these organizations and companies. Many observers warn that they will be used to silence dissent and increase government control. That's not all, however. Georgia has also left the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. This decision came after PACE demanded new elections in Georgia and the release of political prisoners. Though this has not dissuaded the Georgian Prime Minister from being optimistic about his country's EU future.
We are facing some significant challenges with the European bureaucracy, but we are still very optimistic that Georgia's EU membership by 2030 is achievable.
It doesn't end with the new laws or leaving PACE. The Georgian parliament, controlled by the Georgian Dream, has voted to terminate the mandates of 49 opposition MPs. The MPs had refused to take their seats over concerns about the October election's legitimacy.
The opposition cannot permanently, first, show disrespect to its voters, refuse to participate in parliamentary work, and second, all of these cannot be used as a tool for constant blackmail.
Despite these words, the thousands of protesters, including many voters, in Georgian streets aren't there to show support for the Georgian Dream. Quite the contrary. The government's crackdown on these protests has led to a collapse of relations with the United States and many European countries. Many are concerned that despite international condemnation, the situation will continue to deteriorate.
And now we're zooming in on Tbilisi to take a look at the issue in greater detail. Georgia's ruling party, the Georgian Dream, has announced new legislation targeting media and civil society organizations, claiming the changes will align with Western models. However, details of these laws remain undisclosed. The proposed media law would restrict foreign funding and introduce government-defined standards for journalistic ethics and objectivity, monitored by state institutions. The controversial foreign agent law, which labels organizations receiving over 20% of their funding from abroad as acting in the interests of a foreign power, is set to be replaced with a supposedly stricter version, modeled, allegedly, after the US Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA for short. Critics argue that comparisons to FARA are misleading. In fact, unlike its American counterpart, Georgia's law presumes foreign-funded organizations automatically serve external interests, imposing strict monitoring and penalties. The EU's Venice Commission has rejected these comparisons, noting that FARA primarily targets individuals acting under foreign state influence, not media or NGOs receiving grants. Additional legislative initiatives include restricting civil society participation in policy making, allowing public institutions to reject foreign aid, and introducing stricter drug, migration and juvenile justice laws. The government has also eased the process of appointing and dismissing public sector employees, a move critics say enables politically motivated firings. These measures come amid broader democratic backsliding. Georgian Dream has tightened laws against protesters, revoked opposition MPs' mandates, and centralized power in now nearly one-party parliament. The party has also severed ties with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe after it demanded new elections and the release of political prisoners. Georgia's growing rift with the European Union and Western institutions has raised concerns that the country is shifting away from its European aspirations and toward an authoritarian model, potentially aligning itself more closely with Russia. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Tamar Gamkrelidze, the European Neighbourhood Policy Chair at the College of Europe. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation.
So we often say that we shed light on the topic, but here it actually takes on additional importance. There is so much happening, but many people might have already forgotten about Georgia. I think it is our task and our duty to once again raise awareness of the fact that the democratic backsliding there continues. Can you tell us more about the latest developments there, in particular when it comes to arrests being made against members of the opposition?
GD regime has been consistently and coherently working towards to establish full authoritarian control in Georgia. This means that they has been destroying everything that has been achieved for the last 30 years that has made Georgia a relatively free country. They have been destroying and attacking not only opposition leaders and opposition parties, independent media, also the culture of social organization and protest, but also state institutions by using the institutions like police for political persecution, for gang-style assaults and insults of demonstrators. What we see right now is that the agenda of GD regime is Belarusization of Georgia, unfortunately, to transform the country into consolidated autocracy. They have developed a very effective structure, legal and extrajudicial structure for punishment of opposition leaders, journalists, and civil activists.
And by extrajudicial, you refer to situations such as, for example, masked thugs beating people on the streets.
Exactly.
Or intimidation, for example.
Exactly. Surveillance, intimidation, beating of state-associated groups which create the atmosphere of fear and self-censorship. This is one part of the structure that they developed. Another is legal measures and administrative penalties, where both law enforcement officers and judges are involved in executing illegal orders. In this structure, law enforcement officers are involved in fabricating false charges, while judges are imposing monetary penalties and imprisonment. We heard like a week ago that they are going to even step up the efforts for punishment of political opposition activists by introduction stricter legal measures, regulations, and administrative penalties for offenses related to public order and violence and threats against public officials. The changes include stricter administrative penalties, higher fees, up to 60 days of detention for unauthorized rallies and insulting state officials verbally.
Even stickers, I think. There was a case of someone putting up a sticker calling for protests, and they were arrested for that.
Exactly, exactly. And one of the journalists, which has been a very prominent journalist, which is jailed right now, and who has been on strike for, if I'm not mistaken, 32 days. She has been arrested for slapping policeman in the face, the policeman who was not taking the actions against the violence that was happening around him. Right now, this journalist represents a symbol of uncompromising resistance in Georgia. Another changes that they are going to introduce is, we don't have draft law yet. However, they are going to introduce media law, which apparently we will envisage institutional mechanism for monitoring and enforcement of objective broadcasting and journalistic ethics. It will prohibit foreign funding for such media outlets. Of course, these measures are to increase the regime's control and remove decent voices from political space and eventually consolidate autocracy in the country.
And don't you think that this is a particularly dangerous juncture for Georgia? Because on the one hand, as you're saying, stricter control of the media, the government essentially wants to browbeat the opposition into submission. They don't want any dissenting voices. And on the other hand, you have the entire dispute around US aid. Also, you have people like Elon Musk calling for the closure of Radio Free Europe, for example. So wouldn't you say that the danger is that while civic society is, being reduced in capacity in Georgia, also it will have fewer possibilities and opportunities to obtain support from abroad, from the US specifically. So the US will no longer perhaps be quite as willing to finance independent media in Georgia. Do you think that this in particular is a very dangerous moment?
This is a very dangerous moment, exactly, and reduced funding, especially now from USAID for the missions such as monitoring election missions. I was last week I was in Chisinau, and they are also concerned about reduced funding when interference is increasing from northern neighbor, from Kremlin. However, the GD government is under pressure domestically and internationally. Domestically, Georgian people has been organizing a protest on daily basis. If I'm not mistaken, it's 77th day of protest. And even though GD government pretends that it stands strong, there are cracks in the regime due to multiple departures, but also growing victims of the regime who has been affected by repressive measures. And as the number of the victims grow, the protests will become irreversible. As for international pressure, GD regime is under pressure from US, especially 2 weeks ago, Congressman Joe Wilson introduced a non-recognition act of GD regime. Apart from this, number of countries introduced sanctions against individuals, against political elite who is responsible for repression of political opposition, but also protest activists. US slapped sanction against Ivanishvili for acting in the interest of Russia. Last week, PACE, even though it verified mandate for Georgian delegation, it verified it with very strong conditions, and the conditions include new parliamentary elections, release of political prisoners, and punishment of perpetrators. Yesterday, or it was two days ago, Bureau of Regions of Council of Europe made the same statement. However, it's very important to step up measures in order to ensure targeted sanctions against the oligarch, its associates, the family members, because right now we know two things for sure. One is that he loves his money and he gets very much upset when he can't tap into them. Another issue is that he's afraid of the Kremlin, and most probably he has been under FSB surveillance.
So I'm glad that you mentioned also the other side of the so-called USA debate, that the US is also imposing sanctions. And President Salome Zurabishvili was actually recognized through her invitation to Washington earlier this year as the legitimate leader of Georgia. So now, what do you think is the main strength of the Georgian Dream Party? Is it state capture? Is it the consolidation of autocracy, as you said? Or is it also perhaps the strength of its propaganda, especially outside of large cities, where people might still think the Georgian Dream Party is preventing a war from spilling over from Ukraine? I mean, these are the slogans they are using. And they are at least pretending to be a conservative party, which many have pointed out that this is just a facade. But some people might still believe that.
Thank you for this question, because when quite often we're talking about opposition, political opposition, how they are behaving, what they are doing in order to tackle the situation in the country. Right now, within opposition parties, there is this understanding that it's fundamentally important to be more united, more consolidated, to have common action plan, even though they aren't going to form united opposition front because they don't want to speak the same language. They need to ask several questions, and along with President Zurabishvili, in order to tackle current political situation. The first question is, what will make the GD regime and the oligarch to cede the power? As said, it's very much clear that he loves money, and it's very much important to boost the efforts to make sure that the targeted sanctions are imposed on him in the countries where he has the assets. And right now we know that in UK he has almost 85% of his assets. Another question is how to reduce the number of supporters, enablers of the GD regime. And as you mentioned, the GD regime has been capitalizing on two conspiracy theories. The one is West's alleged intention to drag the country into the war with Russia, Ukrainization, so-called Ukrainization of Georgia. Another conspiracy theory relates to also West's alleged intention to change social and cultural fabric of Georgia by imposition of LGBT-related laws that supposedly target Georgian identity. And this means that opposition needs to come up with a plan to fight disinformation and propaganda led by the DG regime for this type of, against this type of conspiracy theories. And the third question that they need to answer is what are the measures the GD government and the oligarch will be using in order to kill the social protests that is happening right now. And the the measures that I listed before that the GD regime is using against protesters, legal and extrajudicial. Against these measures, international pressure is important.
So a lot of work left to do, but not all is lost. Perhaps the democratic backsliding may be reversed at some point. Tamar Gamkrelidze was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is ready to exchange territory with Russia in the case of negotiations. He has not specified which Russian-occupied Ukrainian land Kiev would seek in such an exchange.
Ukraine is showing itself to be increasingly willing to sit at a negotiating table if US President Donald Trump can arrange it. Zelensky has recently floated the idea of trading some territories with Russia. Kiev's forces currently hold some of Russia's Kursk region, though their control has dwindled to around half of what they initially gained in the summer of 2024. Ukrainian officials have said multiple times that the fact that they hold some Russian land could be a very important bargaining chip in potential peace talks. As for what Ukraine would want in return, Zelensky told the British Guardian that all of the occupied territories were important and that there was no priority among them. Ever since the Trump administration took office in January, there has been heightened conversation about possible negotiations to end the war in Ukraine, which is approaching its fourth year.
The new US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is set to visit Ukraine this week and meet with Volodymyr Zelensky. These talks were apparently focused on a potential deal between Kiev and Washington concerning Ukraine's critical minerals.
We're going to stop that.
US President Donald Trump has previously suggested that new aid shipments from the US to Ukraine could depend on various trade deals between Kiev and Washington. Earlier in February, Trump said that he would provide Ukraine with weapons and other aid in exchange for rare earths and other goods. Zelensky, on the other hand, has said that he is open to some sort of agreement that would give American companies access to Ukraine's vast rare earth mineral reserves in exchange for continued support. The Ukrainian president also pointed out that US companies could be at the very forefront of post-war reconstruction efforts. What's more, in a recent interview, Trump has gone so far as to say that Ukraine has essentially agreed to provide Washington with access to the rare earths worth some $500 billion.
According to a recent Reuters report citing two sources, European countries may buy more American weapons for Ukraine. This would be part of the Trump administration's plan to maintain crucial aid for Kyiv ahead of the potential peace talks.
Sources cited by Reuters say that US officials, including Trump's Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg, will discuss additional arms purchases with European partners. These talks are to take place at this week's Munich Security Conference. The entire plan is apparently meant to reassure Ukrainian leadership in the face of potential aid blockages under Trump's presidency and Russia's recent advances in eastern Ukraine. Kellogg himself has declined to comment on specific plans, but he did note that the aid shipments approved by the previous Biden administration are still flowing to Ukraine. The NATO Secretary General has also indicated a willingness to fund US arms for Ukraine's defense effort in January. These reports are in line with the Trump administration's policy of putting more pressure on European NATO members to up their defense spending and send more military support to Ukraine.
Russia's deputy foreign minister has reportedly met with the new US ambassador to Moscow. This comes as online intelligence monitor Ocean Defender posted about a plane supposedly belonging to US Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, heading for Moscow.
Russian state media have not provided any details about the meeting, though the Foreign Ministry spokesperson said it focused on the activities of foreign institutions. Diplomatic contacts between Moscow and Washington have been kept to the lowest level possible since relations deteriorated in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The presence of Steve Witkoff in Russia, however, could mean that the Trump administration is making some serious steps in regard to establishing peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. Following Witkoff's visit to Moscow, American teacher Mark Fogel was released from Russian detention and returned to the United States.
Everybody knows Mark.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.